We begin today by acknowledging that here in Salt Lake City, we are located on land which is named for the Ute tribe and is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. We recognize and respect the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. Additionally, we are utilizing the technology of Zoom, which is headquartered in San Jose, California, on the traditional lands of the Ohlone peoples. We pay our respects to the current and past elders of these lands for their continued stewardship. We must also acknowledge that the prosperity of what we call the United States has depended on the labor of enslaved peoples. Rather than simply speak these words, we encourage all of us to consider donating to organizations such as ACLU, Black Lives Matter, Campaign Zero, and the NAACP. My name is Robin Wilkes Dunn, and I am the Community Engagement Manager for Utah Presents. We are so thrilled to have Dancing Earth here. Elizabeth Archuleta has been instrumental in the partnership of bringing them to our campus and community. Dancing Earth was to be here in Salt Lake City, but because of COVID-19, is only appearing virtually with us for classes and performance. Dancing Earth has been on the forefront of virtual programming since the beginning of the pandemic. I hope you will be able to join us for the virtual episodes of their performance that will start in early November. And now I'll turn this over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Robin. I want to thank everybody for being here and participating, for my students to see what's going on with Dancing Earth and to seeing how the arts coincides and aligns with the academic work that we're doing in the class. So I want to start by having the members of Dancing Earth, the artists and dancers, introduce themselves to all of you.
I'll go ahead and open. Halito Sahoshafoyat. My name is Kayla, and my people come from Afro-Native, specifically the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations and European peoples. I'm very honored to be here and represent who I am in my stories and the love and the light that I have for all people. And I'll pass it to whoever wants to go next.
I'll go next. Hello. Nilse, Kwali Tonali. My name is Quetzal Moctezuma Yautecatl, or Guerrero. I am from Mesa, Arizona, and I am also of Afro-Iberian and Western Hemispheric Indigenous descent. I'm currently on Pima Maricopa or Acamil Autumn land here in Arizona, and I've been a part of Dancing Earth since its inception. And I'm really happy to be here to share my perspectives and my experiences as a dancer and contemporary Indigenous artist. And thank you, and I'll pass it over to Dakota.
Oi, Hafa Eddai, Guahusira Kota Alcantara Kamatsu, Matauzu, Yinen Lagwas, Sumaskazu Gidza Itanu Dok Opsh. Mafimyagunzu Gidza Itanun Snahomish, Zemapotsaidzu Gidza Itanu Swinimish, Shwadabs and Dok Opsh. Mengofin Se, Zen Eginzu, Tauta Mongmon, Tomhom, Zen Hagatnyazu. Greetings, my relatives. Hafa Addai in my language means like, what's up, fellow guardian? Because we look after each other, and our role on this planet is to look after all of our relations. I'm Matau from the archipelago traditionally known as Lagwas, which is momentarily called the Marianas Islands. So the island that I'm from is Guahan and is momentarily most commonly known as Guam, which is a misnomer. I was born in the lands of the Snohomish and raised in the Swinomish, Shwadab, and Dok Obsh territories. And I live here now in Dok Obsh territory in Duwamish land. One of the central teachings of my people is Inafa Maulik, which means to make it good for everybody. And part of that is that before we go into the land or out into the water, we recognize the ancestors of that place. And it's part of us being in good relation to space and to the energy field. And so speaking of energy fields, let me pass this to Kuala. You make sure you unmute my friend.
There we go. Gam yu tian, nya sivia yu kuala iksi jahan. Nya hapsua barbia hapsua liua yuga. Adieu banyam bak squeaka, bam yevka. Nibakwe kwaujika, nibakwe spoka, nibak hanik jimjaka. It is a good day, and I am in great joy to be with each and every one of you. There's so much that is presenting itself within our earth walks. And for us to have that opportunity to have an expression that will allow for those that are in active participation or witness of it will walk away with a heart that is filled with love. So much of our journey through the culture, through the traditions, and all that is the unseen, we as the stewards, the embodiments, the emissaries, are to take upon it and carry that through this earth walk in a way that allows for us, the brothers, the sisters, the relatives, all relations, to learn, grow, and step in the way that is good. My joy to be with you, and my desire for today is to have each one of you, your hearts be touched so that you walk away feeling that you are the most empowered being and there are no boundaries, so you can keep doing and creating at its highest form. Blessings. And I pass this on now to Sandra.
Thank you. Tansei, Sandra Lamouche, Nitsigasun, Nia Nihiao Esqueo. Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Lamouche, and I'm a Cree woman currently residing on the traditional territory of the Niitsitapi, or the Blackfoot Nation, which is in American and Canadian countries as well. The Cree people often translate Nihiao as being an affirmative energy to the world, or living in a holistic or living in a good way. And the word Esqueo for woman is actually from the word Iskoteo, which is fire. And so the women were named after the fire in the center of a teepee or a lodge. And so we keep the family warm and we bring comfort. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you. I pass it on to Talia. Is she a student? I will pass it on to Anne and Raven then.
Danjo Hade Ansi. My name is Ann Posada. I am Jicarilla Apache from Dulce, New Mexico, and I currently live in occupied Tewa lands, also known as Albuquerque.
Pass to me. Oh, okay. Hello. Yat A. My name is Raven Bright. I come from Gallup, New Mexico. I am also on occupied Tewa lands. We're coming from our bedroom today. Lots of plants, lots of everything. I'm Dene, part of the Beth Legene, which is Black Sheep Clan. I'm also half white as well. And yeah, today, just ready to go into it. I want to pass this on to Miko.
Hello everybody, I'm thankful you're well. My name is Lamhi Miko, it means Eagle King. I am Seneca from upstate New York, and I'm also Muskogee from Oklahoma. I am currently joining you guys from occupied territory of the Dakota people, now currently known as Minneapolis. And I am a dancer by forte, but I also specialize in hoop dance, which I've been doing for more than 27 years. So I'm happy to share my experiences with you all today. And I will pass it to our hostesses, I guess, Talia or Opa or Elizabeth, whomever may take the mic.
Okay, I'll step up and take the mic. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Just a lot of wonderful things that you've heard, that I've heard you say. I know my students are going to appreciate it and find some connections to some of the stuff that they're learning in class, just through your own introductions of who you are and where you come from. So I want to start out with the first question. It's a two-part question, and if you want to step in to answer it, maybe Anne can start for us. The question is, the first part is, how do you use cultural traditions, practices, and ways of knowing to create choreographed pieces that are specific to each dancer and their Indigenous heritage? And the second part of that question, which I can repeat if you need me to, is how does this help dancers reconnect with their cultures if they've experienced cultural loss as a result of colonialism?
I'll go ahead and start by answering the first part of that question. As I mentioned, I'm Jicarilla Apache from Dulce, New Mexico. I grew up on reservation with my family and with my teachings and surrounded by culture. So I've been able to be one of the cultural collaborators who's been able to bring my experience and my traditional knowledge into the company to help support the knowledge that we're presenting. And one of the things that I've offered is some of my familial relationship to basket weaving. So I am a 5th generation basket weaver, and I have a solo dance performance that incorporates my personal experience and my relationship to the matriarchs who've passed that knowledge down to me. And within the piece, I talk about everything from the traditional knowledge needed in going to collect the materials that you'll use for the piece, to the process of actually weaving and what that's like, and what the body experiences alongside of that. So the relationship that you have to your work, and what it means to me to be an Apache woman who's received this traditional knowledge handed down generation after generation, to be able to not only share the knowledge, but present it in a way that's maybe a little bit more digestible and a little bit more relatable than, like, say, like a basket weaving workshop. You know, people connect to art in different ways, and they connect to the ideas of matriarchy and the connection to your mother and your grandmother in different ways. So people are able to connect with that particular story on multiple levels, because the story is not only being danced, but it's being told, because there's like vocals of me telling my personal story in that dance piece. And Dancing Earth has done that for many dancers with solo pieces, but also in the larger productions. There's knowledge that's been offered by each of the dancers and by other cultural collaborators. Yeah.
And the second part of that question, how does this help dancers reconnect with their cultures if they've experienced cultural loss as a result of colonialism? Now, I don't know if you can answer that, because it sounds like you've been raised within your traditions and your culture. So, Raven, maybe you can answer that, or maybe one of the other dancers.
I'd like to add something to that if possible. Well, my story and my Indigenous heritage is very much the opposite. I was not raised on a reservation, and a lot of my cultural identity heritage, i.e. Language, ceremonies, dances, songs, history, has been erased because of colonialism. My father is a member of the Auhachaman Juaneño Band of Mission Indians from Southern California. And my great-great-grandfather, Gumercindo Castro, had to flee during times of colonization in order to, save his life. And that he in turn fled to Arizona. And my father's tribe, unfortunately, had sold all their land, whether it be through a good or bad deal, historically. And because of that, is no longer federally recognized as an Indigenous tribe and does not have a reservation. So it's been a constant uphill battle for my father in regaining his identity which in turn is part of who I am, and finding his language and finding his ceremonies and reconnecting with distant relatives. Thankfully now, because of the internet, he's been able to reconnect with his distant relatives, and as well as my grandfather and great aunt most recently, who have been honored as the oldest living elders of the current band of Mission Indians. So being involved with Dancing Earth has been a huge opportunity for me to start to reinvent or manifest the narrative that I see for myself as a living and breathing Indigenous person of this current era and current, a present time, and something where I don't have that wealth of knowledge to pull from, such as language and ceremonies that so many Indigenous peoples have. And I've had to make a concerted effort of discovering that for myself and figuring out what works for me and how I can express it through art and how I can inspire others to do the same.
Anybody else have something to add? Is anybody moved by that question?
I will add a little. So the process of working with Dancing Earth is that not telling the dancers what they need to do, how they need to move, what stories they're bringing to life. That all comes from the dancers. And so I'm born of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So my my maternal grandmother, my Cookum, is an unsolved murder. And for me, that is one of the reasons that I got disconnected from my community, from my reserve. My mom's family and my mom didn't have a lot of support and connection. And so we ended up moving further and further away over the years. But through Dancing Earth, I remember the first piece we worked on around water, she was really asking us what it meant to us. It's not what she thinks it means to others, right? So when she asked that question, I had to reach out to elders, and I started to learn more about what water is. And so I discovered, some of the Cree knowledge and language and stories and traditions around water, even to the point of the elder bringing me to make a tobacco offering into the water in prayer. So there's so much more, like Anne was saying, when you watch a Dancing Earth production, it's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's our personal stories, and then there's also the culture, the research, the history that goes along with that. Thanks.
I want to just add a couple words because I think I have a unique perspective. My people don't have a reservation, and I also grew up thousands of miles away from my homeland. And I think about myself as someone who grew up with my culture. Part of my culture is that we gather together, we cook food, we live in relationship to the land and waters. One of the cultural practices that I grew up with, if we had been living in our homeland, we wouldn't have had access to do that because the U.S. military is restricting our access to the land. So part of wanting to answer this is also to reorient the question, which is about Indigenous peoples experiencing cultural loss, and actually put into perspective that it's about Indigenous peoples being under attack. And despite that, and also because of that, we're able to, our cultures actually teach us ways that the dominating culture so desperately needs. I think about somebody said this beautiful thing to me yesterday, that that the roots of abuse have to do from separating themselves from healing. And to me, Indigenous cultures are all about healing, and healing is just about being in unity with creation. And that's the beauty of dance to me, is the ability to put that way of thinking and that way of being into your mind. And so one of the things that I have experienced a number of times as a member of Dancing Earth is is being asked to project the dance outward to the mountains, right? To root myself in connection to the land that I'm in, right? To experience my connection with the heavens, even if there's a freaking theater roof over my head, right? And so I just think that it's the ability and the willingness to bring our conscious awareness to our interconnection to not only the landscape, but also to vibrate that energy and resonate it outwards towards others.
Thank you. Wonderful answers. And I love how you say that we can be home wherever we are in place. We just have to find that connection with place, as Indigenous peoples have done, found those connections with, you know, the environment and the creatures around us. So thank you all so much. I am going to turn the time over now to Talia Dixon. She's a student I've been working with. She's from the Pama Band of Indians in California, and she's going to ask some questions. So Talia, if you can take over now.
Hi, I'm Talia from the Pama Band of Luiseño Mission Indians, and I also have European ancestry on my mom's side. And I'm a student at the University of Utah studying dance and American Indian Studies with Professor Archuleta. The first question I'm going to ask is, what does Dancing Earth consider the role of dance or movement to play in the current Indigenous peoples movement going on today, like in the current political moment?
Surely. Excuse me. So definitely where a lot of these topics that the other dancers have mentioned kind of play into this already is that what we see our dance as is literally us connecting and telling a story. And so in one movement, of course, what we're doing is creating movement ritual transformation, meaning that what we're doing is breaking ourselves out of our norms, quote unquote, where in our everyday society, we are so upright and strict and linear that we often forget that we are a part of this world, a very round world. And so there's something to that note where we, even just in our chairs, you can sit there and you can wiggle from side to side just to create some movement in your life that would actually be more closely to what we're normally, what our natural bodies would have been engaging in prior to this colonial state. And so what we try to do is to reconnect again to all of these traditional Indigenous ways of life, what some may have thought to have been a belief or, you know, simply a myth or a legend, but these are actually proven ways of life that have been going on for thousands of years. And so what we're doing with this modern time, especially with dance, with any dance really, is the ability to tell a story and to create energy. Oftentimes that energy is very well healing. So not only for the individual doing the dancing, but also anybody watching can very well obtain healing as well. And so from these movements, of course, a lot of our more traditional dances and ceremonies are very well influenced by our everyday lives that help put those movements into action. And for us to be able to teach them to the coming generations, even though they might even never actually see the originators of those dances, quote unquote, but they will know the movements, they will understand the teachings, and they will be able to reconnect and stay connected and be a part of the next generation and pass it on forward. And of course, where we are in this current political state, we have the opportunity to tell our story, and we are all unique. We all have our own story. Nobody's is alike anybody else's, but we are all in this together. And so that's one thing I think that is able to be conveyed, especially through our dance, through many of the stories and topics that Dancing Earth does highlight, is the current contemporary issues that Indigenous people are facing still today, not just previously and why we are in the places that we are, but also the things that we are still fighting against today, even as such as what's going on up in Canada and all across Turtle Island and even beyond Turtle Island, throughout Indigenous peoples throughout the world who are struggling as well. So it is a means for us to be seen, a mean for us to share our story, and also a mean for us to create that change that we need to have happen and create healing.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to add on?
I would like to do a quick little comment. I work in education, and part of that is I reach out to lots of the elders, and they're the ones who educate me and my staff and our teachers. I rarely put myself in that position, but a few recent things that we've had is a session on residential schools, a session on land-based learning, and we also visited a sacred site last week. And at each of those, we had a different elder, but every time the elders were speaking, they brought forth the traditional knowledge. But right alongside that, they tied in environmental destruction or residential schools and how that took that knowledge from some of the sites because they weren't able to travel to them anymore. So for the elders that I work with, like the traditional knowledge is right alongside the social justice and the colonial history, right? They don't separate them. They seem to go with each other in different areas.
I would just want to say a few words quickly. I know I've already spoke, but there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is about the telling of our stories. I recently created a piece that talked about the US military's attempt to turn some ancestral burial grounds into a firing range. And also how the US military has been exposing my community to COVID and those negative impacts and amplifying those stories, particularly because Indigenous peoples, and I think that in some ways, particularly people in the Pacific Islands, which are physically isolated, and the media does a really good job of covering up both the things that the US is doing to us, but also of our resistance to it. So there's one aspect of dance that can be used to like spread the stories of what we're doing. And then when I think about this question, I think about that moment when Idle No More really sparked off. And I think about people gathering and round dances. And I think about, what I see Indigenous leaders doing here on the ground, which is gathering and singing songs and sharing dances. And I think particularly about Mauna Kea and how basically up until about, I don't know, a few months ago, people were gathered there every day dancing and singing. Even though people aren't on the Mauna right now, people are still dancing those songs and singing those songs. And when Auntie Pua came to Lenapehoking, I was living in Lenapehoking for a little while. What she wanted to teach us about resistance was how to chant the songs of the Mauna, right? And how to dance those dances. And I think to me, that's where that magic is. And so I'm really curious about also how our contemporary dance practices can be a part of generating the kind of energy that can transform the hearts and minds of the people who are removing protesters, right? Of the people who are committing harm.
To just add on to the question about how does Dancing Earth consider the role of dance / movement to play in the current Indigenous peoples movements, to tie that in also with Black Lives Matters movement. A lot of this is also shifting a lot of marginalized people to come together and unify. So I went down into Oklahoma, that's where most of my family is, and in Comanche territory, and they were holding powwows and gatherings to unify with the voices of AIM, the American Indian movement, and also Black Lives Matter. So coming together to also like talk about how we just even use like everyday spaces, like a parking lot, gatherings that are just like literally reclaiming spaces in spaces that are being torn apart or that are being reconstructed in space, and just everywhere, parks, people are gathering. So I think that's just like, that's also a part of Dancing Earth, because we've done a lot of rehearsing in non-traditional spaces, westernized spaces like a theater or a studio. So being able to like do things outside and connect all of that, which is just connecting all of the people and the earth together. So yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That was really some good responses to that question. Okay, I'm gonna move on unless anyone has something else to add to that one. But the next question, I'm gonna address to Sandra first, but then anyone can answer. But it's, how has dance provided a healing process for you? And the second part is, has the dance / the healing process changed over time?
So my first healing experience with dance was just when I was a youth, and it was just physical healing. So I was pigeon-toed as a child, and my mom put me in tap and ballet to correct that. But over the years, I took lots of different Western styles of dance, but I never really connected with any of the people that I was in dance with. I was with the same group of people for years and years and years. And so that kind of is the reason why I stopped dancing. And then when I found the hoop dance, or it found me, I was able to experience an aspect of dance that I never had experienced before. And that was the cultural and the social aspect. So to be accepted as a First Nations woman, and to also find the deeper meaning and the deeper purpose behind dance. It wasn't just in the Western sense of being entertainment. It was much more than that. And from there, I've been actually doing more ceremonies that actually have dance within it, right? Lots of the ceremonies do contain dances or are dances. And so I can't really speak too much about that part of it, but it's a way more meaningful dance now. And it kind of spiraled for me to be deeper and deeper into ceremonies. And so when I think of healing through dance, it is an ongoing thing. And one of the Blackfoot elders that I was listening to recently, he said, I'm not born as a Blackfoot person. That's my goal in life, is to become a Blackfoot person by the time I'm an elder. And so I thought that's such an interesting thing, because our Indigenous cultures and the knowledge within and the healing aspects of it are so expansive that we could never really achieve all of that greatness and all of that knowledge, thousands and thousands of years and creation stories from the beginning of time, for us to experience that would be impossible. So all of our lives, we're just always trying to become Indigenous or become First Nations. And so I think it's really a lifelong journey of continual learning.
Let me add on to that. This is Yukwala. I am a member of the Havasupai tribe, and the Havasupai tribe is a very small nation in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We are one of the most isolated native tribes in the state of Arizona, simply in that there's no vehicular traffic going into our village. It is an 8-mile hike, 8-mile horseback ride, or the tribe contracts with a helicopter company that will fly people in and out. Now, I reference this simply because what we in society are so prone to do is to look at a silhouette. The silhouette basically is that first impression of what we see. And what we see many times is something that is stereotyped. And from that stereotyping, we make judgment. And we've got to remember that we are in a culture, tradition, a belief system that goes beyond what is a three-dimensional understanding. And this is where the beauty of when we refer to the artistry, the artist, the creativity that is in every being that is birthed onto the Mother Earth, they've got that opportunity to utilize, to improve, evolve, grow within their earth walks. And we cannot, and this is very important because I'm speaking to those of you that are sitting in the classroom or perhaps looking at this virtually through this, modality with the internet, is for you to not claim that because you're not birthed to a tribe or living within the confines of reservation, ceremonial lands, that is no excuse for you to claim that you cannot learn. There's a beauty and a birthright that is given to every two-legged that is birthed upon the Mother Earth, and that is to understand that you are the result of what a divine source that is unseen has brought you into a birthing that is walking on what we now claim as the Mother Earth. But as we walk into this dimension, every single one of us has a responsibility to be able to evolve within the knowledge that is coming in. And I want for you to also, those that are listening, don't be so adamant about having learning and intelligence come through simply just the education system or from a person whom is telling you. We are nothing more than just interpreters, translators of what is the true teacher, which is the essence of creativity. And in that, we have to have that ability. All traditions, and I go beyond us referencing, I am this tribe, I am this clan, I am of this gender, I am of this. We are claiming on to things that we're using as an excuse for us to be limited onto what we can receive to grow and evolve. Every child, every being that is birthed onto the Mother Earth is seen as a two-legged, the essence of a being that is so proficient with giftings and the knowledge that is to be brought into their use within that earth walk has to be that of what they come into that earth walk experience of. So when we start looking at the healing aspect of artistry, and I use the word artistry, this goes beyond the ability of movements, voice, rhythms, vibrations. It's all the inclusive that goes beyond what we choose within mainstream society to use a language to communicate. This is secondary to the element that we are to present, to posture, to talk, to turn, to do all within every aspect of our day-to-day moment. Do not use the excuse of a performance to let an essence of you to come out that is within you. What is within you must come out at every moment within your earth walk for every heartbeat that comes out. This in itself is a very challenging understanding, so much through the histories and the learnings. We base so much of it in a linear pattern that if we can't see it, feel it, touch it, we have limitations. And this is where you must step away and know that the healing that comes with the artistry is to be able to know that you are the full package. Do not use, again, every single two-legged that I've had the opportunity to have an intimate counsel exchange with, there's excuses after excuses. What I must remind them, the essence that you are sitting in front of me, breathing, desiring to learn, and to know that everything around you is giving you the impetus, the inspiration, the motivation to be able to take that and embrace that and impart that into your earth walk. So therefore, healing is a very tremendous part of the artistic creativity within all walks of life. And the beauty of artistry and creativity is not limited to colors, to social status, or to gender. It is the inclusivity of everything. And this is where the councils of creative elders are in constant agreement that as we teach our children, as we have that ability to interact with those that are desiring to learn, let us focus the topic in the direction that all is acceptable and all is united, all is related, and all as a united force is to bring forth a collective that will assure the continued survival of the two-leggeds, the continued growth and healing in healing and love with all peoples. So there's so much that you need to take into consideration, listen to every comment and every viewpoint that you're hearing today, but we are but a small part of what the true teachers are. Take of the words that you're hearing, what resonates with you, the words that seem to give you that motivation. Take that, step out that door and utilize that. Be conscious of how you're walking, be conscious of how you're standing, be conscious of how you're allowing for the vibrations to be coming through. So this goes in through so many sub-levels, subcategories, but just allow yourself to be the tool, to be the agent of experimentation, and that will bring you into discovery. Thank you.
I have a quick story again about what Euquala just shared. And it was when I first joined ceremony and I was telling my ceremonial mother how nervous I was. And she just told me, you don't have to change anything. You don't have to change who you are. And so I just, it really affected me. You know, we're holy already. We're all holy. And I think that's a little bit of what Euquala was getting at.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is addressed to Raven, but again, anyone can respond if they feel the desire. And this question is, how is the physical practice of dance different from connecting to Indigenous knowledge and beliefs in a non-physical manner? And then the second part asks, what do you experience when you embody an Indigenous worldview through movement?
Oh man, that's a good ass question. Woo! Oh man, all right. First things first, I want you all to raise your right hand with me. Put your two fingers in the middle to your thumb. I want you to give your people next to you little giraffe kisses. The little boxes, there's people next to you, right? Up and down, if you're in the middle, give everyone little giraffe kisses. That looks so cool, just zoom me, oh my goodness.
Are you sure you want to kiss? Okay, thanks.
Oh yeah. Anyway, so one thing that I thought was really interesting was, oh, Miko. Okay, sorry. One thing I thought was really interesting when I started my movement practice, my mom forced me to dance when I was like 5 or 6 years old. It was the worst thing ever for me because I was socially awkward and the whole process of it was horrible. But the thing that made it bad for me was the fact that I had to dance in front of other people. At the end of the day, like learning all these things was fun, but when you're in a group and there's people surrounding you in every direction, I felt at my most, I don't know, how do you say that? Vulnerable form. And I couldn't connect to that for the longest time. And once I did actually start connecting to that, I realized that's a form of resistance. And that was the first step in me like reconnecting to my culture, reconnecting to my Dene heritage. And steps over time have built that up. And I think one interesting thing, as I learned from one of my elders, his name's Randy Boogie, is his idea is there's a section of 6 directions. We can move forward, we can move back, side, side, we can move up, we can move down. But in order to fully embody any of those directions, you'd have to go from inside. And that's that 7th direction. And that's that idea where it's that different soul dance. And honestly, when you're at a cipher or when you're doing something with movement and you see someone, you're like, oh, cool, they're dancing. And then you look over here and you're like, oh, shoot, look at that person. And they're like dancing it all up. They have that soul dance and they're reaching deep inside of themselves and giving their most vulnerable self to the rest of the world. And that's what really makes it like so much of an awesome experience. That's what brings the eye in. That's what pulls you in. And I think that's really interesting how hip hop culture is connected to that, you know, in ways. It roots in Black and Indigenous culture. And I think one of the really cool aspects of it is the idea of a powwow. And like, it's an idea of a circle, you know, things happen circularly. But, and you think about a breakdance cipher, it's also that idea of a cipher circle. And that's where I connect to that concept of, that's where it becomes spiritual for me, is because of that idea of a circle. You know, when you bring yourself into that spot, you become, I guess, an energy. I feel like an energy when I'm in there. I think what's really cool is when the music's bumping and everyone's dancing and everything, you no longer have to communicate with people in like a voice manner. There's always some way of like communicating to someone with your movement, you know. For some reason, when I'm in a cipher or when I'm dancing with other people, I don't have to tell them anything because I know what they're thinking. I know what's going on inside their minds because they've shown me that form of themselves. And I think that's the way that I connect to it. And it's helped me with Dancing Earth, because Rulon does some really cool stuff in relation to decolonizing different dance practices, aka ballet, modern, jazz, lyrical, tap, all of those concepts. It's like, that's cool that they have those concepts. And Rulon's like, let's take a step back though. Let's look through that lens. And it's like, we end up doing these crazy things where we go past the idea of modern or past the idea of jazz and lyrical and all that. And it just, it breaks outside of the box of what is and shows us what we can become. You know, and I've seen so many people, everyone in the Dancing Earth community has an amazing and different style. You know, like you can be one dancer when you start, but at the end of your summer intensive of Dancing Earth, or at the end of your time period with them, or during their period, I think it's really cool to see how they've turned from one dancer to another. You know, I'm not the same dancer that I was 2 years ago before I joined Dancing Earth. I've changed, and my whole idea of movement has changed, and it's just grown and flourished in a way that I don't think I would have ever looked at, you know, if Rulon didn't put that lens in front and like kind of exploded that whole viewpoint on top of it. So I guess, yeah, my movement was the giraffe hands and that idea of love and significance. And it brings in an idea of connection as well. We're all connected in this certain path and pattern. And giraffe is awesome.
And he's a b-boy by trade. That's his traditional style of dance.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Opa Mafua. I am Pacific Islander, specifically Tongan, and I am also Native American, specifically the Northern Arapaho tribe. And my question is for Quetzal and Kayla, but anyone is more than welcome to answer. How does Dancing Earth embody Indigenous knowledge about sustainability and environmental futurism?
I say break bread. That's what I said. Break the bread. It's time to share up. I mean, like when we're in community and when you're dancing, it's all about sharing our food, sharing our knowledge, sharing our resources, sharing space. It's that concept of break bread. That's all that's how I relate it to. It's like we're in community and sharing our resources. And it's tangible, it's spiritual, it's intellectual, and yeah, I think it just like hits all of those it hits everything, like when you're a part of the company. And it for me, it really has helped me translate that into my communities that I serve locally here where I'm at. And so yeah, it just gives you different perspectives on how we show up for each other in our community.
I love it. Yeah, I feel just partaking in dance and connecting with what it means to you in your own indigenous search or self-discovery. It's all about minimalism. It's all about looking towards a future that's going to mean something for everybody. For me, dancing with Dancing Earth and reconnecting with my indigeneity is all about upcycling, making something out of nothing, which is very in alignment with my own hip hop background. I also started as a b-boy, and I connected with very much the same things that Raven connected with, the whole ritualistic, embodiment and symbolism behind the cipher and the circle, and becoming that energy and communicating with your body. These are all things that transcend language and certain social acceptable behaviors that we are taught in this society, which is very much out of balance with nature. So to be able to reconnect with your body, tell those stories, express yourself in movement, embody those modalities of energy, is something that is very, very powerful and points to tools that we can use to narrate and illustrate and manifest our future as young indigenous peoples, or as Yukwala said it, as two-legged peoples of this earth. This doesn't exclude anybody. This includes everyone, and us being able to tell our stories and perpetuate the stories that need to be heard, and live by the examples of inspiring people to then move and create their own movement and connect with their own bodies, to recognize what they don't need, to leave behind what they don't need, and to invest in what they really do need, and what they really do need to connect with, which is community, which is, amistad or brotherhood, breaking that bread, like we're saying. It's been, for me, it's been an incredible tool for me to come to a realization of how I can incorporate more sustainable practices in my own life, which in turn will instill an example to others who I fellowship with, in creating a future that is sustainable, that is holistic, that is on the right path, on the right walk.
Anyone else? Okay. So we'll move on to our next question, which is for Dakota and Sandra. So missing and murder Indigenous women and girls has been a huge part of American Indian history. How do you feel that it's just recently had some increased attention? And going on to that, how could you implement that into contemporary dance?
We were both doing the "you take it first" dance, but I'll follow your lead and I'll go first. Well, obviously it's a crisis that it's just now gaining attention in places outside of our communities, and and it's terrible that we live in a moment where Indigenous women are being disappeared, and it's also connected to a legacy of colonization and patriarchy. I'm connected to the movement ending gender-based violence, particularly through my sister, who I think about it has brought me into the movement as a young person. So I have a bunch of people I think about as aunties and aunties who have been on the ground serving survivors as advocates and also as community organizers. And I think that the aspect of the movement that I'm really interested in is making connections between the liberation of Black and Native communities, particularly through abolishing the police and abolishing the prison systems, Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation with domestic violence and sexual abuse and human trafficking and sex trafficking. And I think that all of those movements are really important to take into account, because when we're talking about what's happening to Native women, we're actually talking about systems of oppression, systems of dispossession, theft and violence and abuse. And if, you know, all of us are, what are the statistics? I think the statistics are 1 in 3 women on this earth have reported experiencing abuse, which means that probably most men have also caused harm. Not that men are the only people that cause harm and women aren't the only survivors of abuse, but we do know that the majority of people who have caused harm are men. And that's not to say that men are bad, but it's just to say that we have work to do on this planet, right? And so how can we as Indigenous people be talking about healing? How can we be people working on collective liberation if we're not centering the truth, which is that we've addressing patriarchy and dismantling it has to be central to what we're doing. And so when I think about how that connects to dance and movement, a couple of things come to mind. One is that movement practices, somatic and body practices, for me, can be a form of healing. And particularly because I think that so much of abuse has to do with disconnecting us from our bodies and disconnecting us from our power. And I know that me coming into my relationship to my body has been a big part of reclaiming my personal autonomy, and then also being able to offer those ways of being and knowing to people in my community. You know, my sister tells this story, and I think that this is really true, that like there's this way in which it can be really, my sister says that she's the kind of feminist that if somebody says something sexist on the street, she will cuss them out and be like, you better back off. But if our dad says something sexist, it can be much harder for her to be like, hey dad, you know, like reel that in. And I think that dance can be a way actually of generating that power to be able to be like, hey, I need you to think about this. And this might sound a little bit disconnected, but for example, I had a really hard conversation with somebody today who is a white person who showed up in Hawaii, and they're posting photos of them having, you know, a really good time on this land that a bunch of Native, and right next to all their photos on my feed are all of my Kanaka friends who are like, hey, you're endangering our lives by coming here. You know what I mean? Like you're damaging us, you're putting our lives at danger, and we don't want you to come here. And I think that I was able to have this complex conversation with them because I've been able to embody my love for all of creation, to be able to know people's goodness and autonomy, and also be able to hold that there's some harm happening. So I think that dance can actually create that space for complexity, that like none of us, probably most of us on this planet are survivors of some kind of abuse, if not all of us, right? And we also know people. The harm is not happening in some like kind of mystical world for the most part. It's mostly people that we're connected to, right? So when I think about how to use dance, I think about it as like, how do we use dance as a way to get closer to ourselves and get closer to each other, and be able to generate the power internally to say, hey, like, that's not okay. You know, what you're doing and what you've done is not okay. And I love you, and part of me loving you is having to tell you and to stop you from doing that anymore. Yeah, and I also just want to shout out API Chaya, which is a organization here in this area that has been using art, and particularly dance and body movement, as a tool to empower survivors of abuse, and are people working directly with survivors of human trafficking as well. And them and a plethora of other people are doing some really great work on this front.
Thanks for sharing that. So my Cookham, I already mentioned, is an unsolved murder, and that was from 1966. So my mother was only 10 years old at the time. And I didn't know this growing up. It wasn't until university when I started to advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women that I came to ask my mom what happened to her mother. And so that's where the story came from. I came to be an advocate before I even knew how it affected my own family. My sister was also a missing person for a while, and through elders and ceremony, we were able to find her as a family. So it wasn't the police that did any of the work. It was me and my family that went out and searched and brought her home. So I just like to, make that clear to people. But when we talk about the trauma alongside the healing, I mean, there's so much teachings about women in our cultures, and I shared what the Cree word for woman is. It's the center of the home. It's the warmth and the comfort of our houses, and so much more of water carriers, life givers, culture carriers. We make sure the language and culture is passed on to the children as the child caregivers in most cases. And so when you value women, and especially Indigenous women, it makes that violence so much harder. And so when you think of the destruction of the earth, if you value the earth and know those teachings about respect, it makes that so much harder. And so when we talk about the healing aspect and how it fits with the social justice pieces, I think that's what comes to mind. But when we think of women, we think of the earth as a mother. And so I always have felt that those two, violence against women and violence against the earth, are hand in hand. And so through our dance, when we tell our empowering stories alongside the violence and trauma, it's part of that healing and part of that movement to make people think differently, not only about Native women, but also about the earth, and make that violence less acceptable, or let people know what they're really doing, I guess.
Thank you, Sandra. I just wanted to make a couple more connections that I'm realizing that I felt I would be incomplete if I didn't spell this out. But there's also a way in which the issues of the climate crisis and Indigenous sovereignty are directly linked to this issue. What we do know is that there's a high rate of murdered and missing Indigenous women around places where there's extraction happening. So around oil, the tar sand mines and other places, pipeline projects, where people are brought in to work. And that's directly connected to Indigenous sovereignty, because the pipelines would not be being built if the lands were in the hands of Indigenous peoples. And it's also connected to Indigenous sovereignty because part of the reason why it's so hard for people who are, again, I feel really complex. I'm an abolitionist, right? I believe in the abolition of the United States, the prison industrial complex, prisons, police, and indigenous native peoples who cannot prosecute people who commit crimes on their reservations if they're not members of their nations. And that is an indigenous sovereignty issue, right? And so those are the two ways that they're linked. And then I also want to shout out this work by the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic Violence, who released this paper that talks about how that recognizes that oppression is the root cause of domestic and sexual violence, and that that prevention work with young people is actually doing anti-oppression work. And a big part of doing anti-oppression work is doing cultural work, right? So if you remove indigenous peoples from our ability to be on our land, to practice our culture, to practice our ceremonies, then you're actually contributing to oppression, which leads to more sexual and domestic violence and makes it okay, right? And this speaks directly to what Sandra is saying right now about how our cultural teachings actually teach us to respect each other, right? I mean, I don't want to be simplistic, but being indigenous is, I mean, the ideas are kind of easy, right? It's like, be good to each other, be good to the earth, voila, indigenous. I mean, I'm being cheeky, but yeah. I mean, it's something that somebody said, it's like they're complex, but through simplicity. And so, yeah, I just wanted to shout out that paper and that resource, and say that's, you know, that's kind of what a lot of people in the field are talking about right now in this moment too.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I will move on to my final question for Dakota and Yukwala. How can dance be used to reclaim Indigenous identity within tribal communities? This could also be answered by everyone and anyone. So,
this is Yukwala again. The simple connect is just the act of how our bodies work. We bring so much emphasis onto a Western intelligence that we make so much effort to validate and qualify. This puts us right in a belief system that's not going to have that evolution to promote the change. Therefore, we need to be able to pull on the other abilities of whom we are as that complete package being the element of the body being. And this is where through the history, through the generations, it was never so much, it was never always in the place of oratory, anything that was audible or spoken. It was based in the essence of how we allowed for movement to make a statement, how we stepped upon the Mother Earth, how we brought the elements of the elementals, the tree people, the rock people, the cloud people, on and on into our embodiment. So if you look back historically, you see the whole concept that was brought in from the beginning, that we were to utilize the essence of the body silhouette to embody, to shape shift into the various forms to communicate. Now, it is so obvious and blatant that in this day now, we quickly can shut off our desire to listen or see anything if it is spoken. And therefore, it is so important that within the ways of dance, movement, culture, songs, all of these are what brings in a connect from a vibrational standpoint that will connect with that body being. And this is where I really am such an adamant supporter of, don't be so focused on how to say or what to say. I want for you to be focused on the beauty of what you are as a complete, healthy, high frequency, heart-led, spiritual, individual creation being, and utilizing that, because it is said by the ancestry, words are secondary. They will see you well before they ever hear you. So if you walk in to the ceremonial arena or into the light of the first ray, or at a moment, the essence of the witnesses, and the witnesses are not just limited to the two-leggeds that are there within your clan or tribe. This is the elements of all that is creation. So when we are walking into areas that may be pristine, remote, natural areas, we've got an audience of the ancestors that are there. We don't speak to them in the English language, nor do we speak to them in our native language. They're watching from the moment we stepped upon her, how we were walking, what we were bringing into where we were allowing our energy to emanate and radiate, to how we were communicating with the wingets in the sky, how we're connecting with the elements of the wind people. All of those are the tools that we need to pull upon. The reason I say this, if in fact we maintain the old blueprint that we must have a document to be able to present a situation that needs to be brought into light, we're going to have nothing but conflict initially, because there's always the sides that are there. Now, if we can bring in, under the guise of ceremony, dance, movement, vibration, sounds, the issues that are prevailing within the earth walks of all mankind, we're bringing attention to that in a way that may be from an artistic perspective, but it is giving a very powerful statement as to what is being done. And this is why we need to be able to have that ability to see the situations that are affecting the well-being of all living beings, and to be able to take that and bring that into an artistic format, an artistic piece that will bring in at a moment where people gather, even if it is a ticketed event and in a man-made facility. The fact that we have that 1 hour, 2 hour time in which to have this exchange, use that. And you, as a being that is part of the troop, the company, or the whole, you have a very important part into it. So know the ability of your body, and know that that body is making a profound statement. And I say this because not many of us, we have a very difficult time in trying to say what we want to say. And half the time when we say things, we say it in the wrong way, and we're not bringing it forth in the way that's going to have that impact for those that are there. But I will also say, aside from utilizing the artistry of dance to bring commentary to situations that are affecting the well-being of all relations, it is also important for you to understand that the world is seeing the silhouette that you are, and this silhouette should embody the integrity of your ancestors, for you are the walking legacy of all that has been your bloodline lineages. And in this time, do anything and everything to maintain the integrity of that and connect. It is our lifeline, and we need to bring that in. And we've got to remember, though we may be a variety of bloodlines within this one silhouette, that just simply means that you've got a treasure trove of information to pull from. But from pulling on that, learn to bring it forth in something that's going to make a very profound statement into the earth walk of all mankind right now. Blessings.
Thanks, Paula. And I want to make an offering in this regard too. It's going to be a very active one, so I'm going to ask you to stand up and just stand up if you're able to. And first of all, just put some attention on your feet's connection to the earth, right? And then you can put a little bit of bounce in that. And you'll notice that when you hit the ground, the body's natural inclination is to have energy move through it, right? So that's the reciprocity. That's the reciprocity with the earth, embodying the connection, right? And you have a little bit of bend in your knee. It allows you to do that easier. So that's that give and receive action, right? If you can give a little to the earth, it will give back to you, right? And that's energetic. And then you can kind of keep that motion going, and then just take some deep breaths in. Yeah, maybe come to a pause for that and just focus on your breath for a second. We'll take 3 deep breaths together. So you can just allow yourself to just pay attention to your breath as I speak, and just keep that deep breath going. And I want to just say a couple words about how your breath is an embodiment of Tensuli or Inafa Maulik, actions of reciprocity and making things good. So the first thing is that we know from Western science and from indigenous science that breath work, paying attention to our breath, brings us into a state of peace. And in my culture, we call this Magung, and Magung means to have breathed, right? So just have a second to have breathed, and you'll feel the peacefulness, the confirmation of our indigenous knowledge if you needed it. And then the second thing is that we're giving air out, and our tree relatives are transforming that to give it in, right? And so I want to ask you now to just take your hands, and you have your feet shoulder width apart, and I want you to scoop up that beautiful energy from the trees and give it back to the trees. One more time. Right? The action of Inafa Maulik through the breath. We need breath in order to dance. If you dance without breath, well, you'll look funny, but you'll also pass out. A lot of this can be really simple. And one of the ways that I like to, those are just a couple of the ways that I like to embody some of those teachings. All right, Migai Ma'asi.
Okay, I think I'm going to step in now and ask Miko, Ann, and Raven, all 3 of you or whoever feels moved, to talk about how dance helps to cultivate hope in the midst of cultural dislocation. I think much of what all of you have talked about has addressed that sense of dislocation and how we need to find a sense of space and place and what that means for us in our own cultural traditions, and how we move closer to those cultural traditions, because, Dakota, you said that violence disconnects us from our bodies, and I think that's so true. I think especially in relation to what we're talking about in my class, and how, just that active breathing and movement makes us focus on our own bodies. So how do we cultivate hope, or how does dance cultivate hope in the midst of cultural dislocation?
I would definitely say, particularly for myself, that I grew up away from my home territories. My mother's territory is from Western New York. My father's relocated territory is in Oklahoma. But for me, growing up in Los Angeles, dance was especially a way for me to maintain that connection, even if only in the slightest. To say the least, our songs and dances can be done and carried within our bodies and practiced anywhere. So that was one of the things that was always very empowering for me, was that not only do I know my songs and dances, but I can bust them. That was something that I think gave me a huge foot in the game as far as being able to move towards actually finding my own culture and finding my own traditions and such. And to that same note, for my father's side, Muskogee people have been relocated from their original homelands in the Southeast. And put into this Oklahoma territory, which was deemed native territory. And while we were displaced, we still maintain our songs, our culture, our dances, and that is precisely what is able for us to allow ourselves to be able to continue teaching future generations and allowing ourselves to be still heavily intact, meaning we still have our communities, we still have those get-togethers, and we still have those songs and dances for us to be able to relive within our own genetics, but also again pass down to future generations. And so I think, especially in the sense of again for myself, growing up powwow style was one way of, in the slightest tangent, having a connection to my indigenous culture, but it allowed me to have the opportunity to be able to connect with other individuals that are also on that same path. We have all very, very well been dislocated and are all kind of scrambling to pick up the pieces of what was left. And so wherever you can find it, whomever is carrying it is going to be the ones to help you find your path, find your roots, and find you with your sense of groundedness being complete. Because even for me, when I got back to my home territory, that was something that was interesting, that alluding to another question that was asked previously, is that for me, I was always an adamant and proud dancer, proud to exercise my culture, not only socially within the ceremony, within our community gatherings, but also outside of that, meaning in the public spaces, in non-traditional spaces, and other social gatherings where definitely people have never seen the likes of Native Americans that don't even know we exist even to this day. So for me, it was a really empowering way for me to uphold who I am, my own identity, and also really well practice it more than just know about it, as opposed to, because some people, even on my home territory, take it for granted, where they aren't necessarily connected to ceremony. They don't necessarily practice song or dance. And that's something that I felt was a huge misfortune for them, because we have all been afflicted by colonialism and this trauma and this dislocation, and literally our languages and songs being beaten out of us and prosecuted, and having ourselves, and not even 7 years before I was born was when the Native American Freedom of Religious Act happened. And so again, for us to actually have the opportunity to and not be thrown in the slammer is a huge act of defiance, and act of resilience, and act of sovereignty, as for us to still have our songs, to still have these things in connection, not only to our actual lands, but also literally to what they are and the meanings and purposes and the teachings behind them. So very, very big topic, but it can go so much further into our everyday lives. But again, I think that is something that was huge for me, was being able to have a dance as a way to connect, as a way to feel empowered.
Thank you. And you have something to add to that?
Miko said all the things that I wanted to say. But basically, our bodies are mobile, we take ourselves and our culture with us wherever we go. As my Dene brothers and sisters say, we walk in beauty, and we can take all of those things with us. And dance is such a mode of connecting. Even if you're just dancing by yourself, you're connecting with yourself. But as you move into more public spaces and dance in other spaces, you'll connect with other people, and through that will come sharing and growing. And been all over the world, fortunately, with Dancing Earth, and I've met so many different natives that I didn't know about, and met them through dance. We've been able to share and connect through those bonds and through movement. So super grateful for that.
Okay, so we're going to end right here. I want to thank you all for your words, your thoughts, your experiences. This is going to mean so much to my students. It's meant so much to me. It's just filled my heart to hear you all speak your truths and share your experiences with us. And to use, who was it that was saying about breaking bread? Thank you for breaking bread with all of us here. And I'm going to let Robin get back on and put us in gallery view so we can all be on the screen together. Robin?
Yes, thank you all so much. And I And for you students, I will send out information about the performance that will be starting in November. It's a series of episodes, and we'll send out more information on that. And I just want to thank Elizabeth and our Opa and Talia and all of you dancers. Thank you so much for everything.
Were you going to put us on gallery view so we can all say goodbye to each other?
We're on gallery now.
Well, we are. Okay, I guess I have mine on speaker view. Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Take a big reach out to both sides. See whoever's out there and then give them a big hug.
Big virtual hug.
And then spread it back out. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay, so I've stopped the recording, and but thank you all again. And I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced a couple of names there, but it's amazing. Thank you for sharing. It only makes me, I wish we were all together, but I am hoping that I'm just glad that we're able to do what we're doing now. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Archuleta.
Elizabeth, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Igama asi fanatati.